Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ethos Online, where we want to learn to be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. And so, wherever you are, whether you are, again, in your car, in your living room right now, just relaxing this Saturday morning, wherever you are, welcome to this safe space. Again, we want to be a safe space where people can just learn to be themselves. So again, today, we are moving through this really interesting series called A New Way to Be Human. We want to look at these teachings of Jesus because for many of us, we grew up with the Bible as our narrative. It was kind of our guidepost, our navigational tool, right, toward what brought us ethics, morality, values. But the problem is for many of us, we've been kind of deconstructing things. We began learning and understanding new ways of viewing this, and some of the things we've kind of outgrown. Other things become more beautiful. And so as we do that, all this time we're looking at this beautiful picture and we're saying, what else does it mean? How can I utilize this in my life right now? And so the teachings of Jesus, I think, are really, really helpful then and today. And so today, again, I want to look at the Sermon on the Mount in this series, A New Way to Be Human. And so last week we talked about Jesus, right? We were talking about how Jesus, he goes up onto this mountain and the story goes, the gospel writers say that he begins teaching people and he begins offering them these new kind of twists on the law. And so it's really important to know, again, if you are a first century Jewish person, this is a pretty normal thing. Rabbis would go somewhere, they would sit, and then they would expand on the Torah. They would share different ideas, but they'd always kind of add their little twist. And some of the best rabbis, like Hillel and others during that time era, they would take a normal, just very small scripture, and they would just expand on it for hours. And it just captivated people because they always added this little interesting spin that had people constantly, for the rest of the week, they'd be arguing and discussing it. And so Jesus becomes that figure for them. And in fact, for the first century writers who are called the gospel writers, what they're doing is they're trying to show Jesus is just like our past rabbis. He's actually like Moses and some of our patriarchs. And so there's a reason when he goes up onto the mountain and he begins sharing ideas of the law, if you're a Jewish person, immediately you connect him to this guy, Moses. You immediately connect when Moses comes down from the mountain and gives them Torah, right? The law. He gives them the way in which to view the world and again navigate it in a harmonious way. That's what the law was. For us, again, today, we have some pretty negative connotations to law, but again, not for them. For them, these rules, right, these ways of living, they were actually really crucial for how to be a better human being. And so they knew that this thing was like divine, right? It was beautiful. And so Jesus steps onto the picture. He's like Moses 2.0. And again, quoting one of my favorite quotes on this, Jesus said, when he begins sharing this sermon, the sermon is basically a critique. It's a critique on the heart of the law. And so growing up, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a tribe, a group of people that we kept all 10 of these rules, and we were pretty proud of it. We would do every single one of them, and I remember thinking, we even keep the fourth one that nobody else keeps, like we've got it. But then I pick up Matthew 5, and I begin hearing about this Rabbi Jesus who is talking about, okay, you know, you're feeling pretty good about not murdering people, which I was kind of like, yeah, let's check. One more thing, I did great. He says, yeah, but even if you were angry with someone, if you had hate in your heart, like you murdered them, I'm thinking, crap, like I can't get it right. Now, I was doing fine with 10, and now you're adding like 50 to it? Like I can't win, right? Because it becomes a bunch of rules, a bunch of regulations, right? That's what the whole thing becomes when you view it from a 21st century perspective. But if you take it back and you view it from a first century perspective, if you view it from a Jewish first century perspective, the whole thing hums. And so I might remind you, in 70 AD, the Jews lost their temple. And again, when I say lost, it was completely destroyed, not a brick left standing. And this Jewish group of people who had been rebelling against Rome, they're completely destroyed. There are thousands of them murdered, the young, the old, right? Pregnant women. Anyone who couldn't make it up to the hills was murdered. And so they're asking the question now, again, where is our hope? Is Jewishness dead, right? Is our people's identity totally gone now? Like, who are we? And then in steps the stories of Jesus. That's when the first gospel, Mark, is written. The first one, that's actually the first one written. It's sent out to remind the people there is actually a look back and look forward. Jesus was here. He shared these beautiful messages, and it's kind of the same message, but something bigger moving in us, through us. And so that's where you get this beautiful Sermon on the Mount. And it starts with this. It starts with a bunch of blessings. And I remember reading these as like, oh, nice. If I do this, then I'm going to get blessed by God. I'm going to get a bunch of gifts. Not exactly the context. The actual word here is ashrei. And ashrei means basically you'll find yourself happy, or you'll experience fortunate events, basically, when you follow certain things in life. So it's more of a consequence, right? When I choose to do good things in the world, naturally good things just happen. It's kind of this law of the universe, right? If I'm an absolute jerk, people probably aren't going to want to spend time with me, right? Natural consequences will occur. And so if you do this, naturally this will happen. And that's kind of the crux of the beginning of the blessings. And also know this, and again, I love looking back, understanding why they're doing what they're doing. The gospel writers, they begin with blessing for a purpose. Because anyone reading this, again, if you're a Jew, you have taken the first, the 5 books of Torah, and you have memorized them. And by the time you're age 12, you've taken a test on them. And so you are pretty good at memorizing these scriptures. You know them. And so when you hear a certain verse or certain words or phrases, you are immediately connecting it to those books. It's just like us with any song, right? We'll hear a song, do, ice, babe, whatever, and we'll pick it up and we'll immediately start humming the song. We'll start singing the song. For them, they hear the word, the phrase, and they immediately go to Deuteronomy, right? You hear about blessings and curses, all these things. You go to Deuteronomy. You remember Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28, it starts with this, really interestingly enough. If you indeed obey Israel and your God and are careful to observe all his commandments I am giving you today, God will elevate you above all the nations of the earth. All these blessings will come to you in abundance if you obey. And so if you look back at Matthew 5, 1 and 2, very similar thing. Because again, the writers are wanting you to connect Jesus with Moses, with the old way of viewing the world, with a new perspective, a new twist. See it? So yeah, and this is why in Deuteronomy, watch this now, verse 3, it says this, you will be blessed in your city and blessed in your country. Again, this is a very common blessing. They would memorize Deuteronomy 28, one of the most important blessing chapters of all of their scriptures. They knew this. You will be blessed in your city and blessed in your country. So again, it's almost like this idea, bless our home, right? When we follow certain ways of life, when we do certain things, our home is blessed. We experience good things. But here's the question, if you are a first century Jewish person, right? You've memorized Deuteronomy 28. You know that if you do these things, if you keep the law, if you follow these new ways of being human, right? If you do this, your nation, your home will be blessed. But the question, of course, is what happens when you no longer have a home, right? What happens if you are a nation who just lost their home, lost their temple, are on the verge of losing their very identity? What happens? Because that verse, it kind of seems to fall flat for them right now. And so that's the beauty of what Jesus is going to do here. He's going to take that promise, right, that blessing, right, and what he's going to do is he's going to share it with a twist, one that would have been very relevant for the people during that time era. And so Matthew 5, verse 3, interesting enough, verse 3, and what you'll see is this. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Now, I know I've heard a lot of people do this. A lot of people give sermons about, they'll talk about the poor in our country, the homeless, and all of this, and those are great talks. We can take these Bible verses and we can use them to do positive things in the world. Awesome. However, we're removing it from the context, because if you look at the context, it's actually something really, really beautiful, even more beautiful. So watch this now. Poor in spirit, again, to first century readers, is like, well, the poor, homeless people, this or that. In first century, poor in spirit was a very common phrase, and it was used often in their ancient writings, the older writings, the Old Testament. So again, for a first century people, when they hear poor in spirit, they hear someone who has no spiritual home. It's Israel without Israel. It's Israel without its homeland. It's Israel without its earth to stand on. You see it? And so again, Israel without its spiritual home, poor in spirit. And so Jesus is saying, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the people who don't have a spiritual home. The lonely, right? The people without community. The people without a spiritual home. I want you to think about this for a minute. I was thinking about our country and this idea of a spiritual home. And I came across a bunch of interesting statistics I want to share with you. Over 1/3 of U.S. adults age 45 and older report they don't feel like they have a spiritual home, a community. Interesting, right? 55% of midlife and older adults say they feel a deep sense of loneliness. The population of lonely people over age 45 has grown, watch this now, by 5 million, from 42.6 million to 47.8 million in the past 8 years. We are a nation that has tons of social media, all these different ways to connect with people, but we're feeling lonelier and lonelier. And this sense of a spiritual community or home is less and less and less. And then think about this one. CNN just gave a report not too long ago, and they said people who profess no faith affiliation, called nuns, N-O-N-E-S, they are now forming 23% of the country's adult population, according to Pew Study. So again, that puts the unaffiliated on par with evangelicals, who are 25.4, and ahead now, again, the nuns are ahead of the Catholics at 21% and mainland Protestants at 14.7%. So if you just heard me, you just heard now, Christianity, churches, there's a mass exodus right now away from spiritual community. People are finding themselves spiritually homeless, without their homeland, right? Without their temples. And so the question is, where are they going? And isn't it interesting, at the same time, in our culture, there's a deep, deep sense of loneliness and disconnection. There's a deep sense that I don't have a spiritual home anymore. Yeah. So again, can this be applied to today? Yeah, it can. I want you to think about this too. Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So again, many of us grew up with this idea, kingdom of heaven is up there, right? It's somewhere that we're going to get to someday if we keep all these things, right? It's going to be up there someday if I just follow the right rules, the regulations, I don't mess up, I'm going to get to go up there in the clouds. This idea, fortunately, unfortunately, wherever you stand, is just simply not how the Jewish people perceived kingdom of heaven. That is a Roman idea taken from the Greek and Roman gods sitting up on clouds looking down. That's not actually how the Hebrews viewed it. It's just not. Kingdom of heaven was how the nation of Israel viewed their homeland. So when you start talking about kingdom of heaven, understand Jesus is saying our homeland, the place where we feel connected to the divine the most, the place where we feel connected to each other the most, where there's freedom, not oppression, right? Where people, where they can go and they can be completely free. They can be in loving community. They can have all of those things right here, right now. Tikkun olam, nothing missing, nothing broken. Shalom. That's home, and it happens here, not somewhere else. That's what the Jewish people are connecting to when he says kingdom of heaven. Yeah, interesting, right? So the kingdom of heaven, again, remember, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven, this whole thing that we've been waiting for, Israel right here, right now, Israel on top, Israel under our feet, our temple again, us having all of that, our homeland back. What's interesting about this is that Jesus says, stop waiting for it because it's already here. It never left you. It was within you the whole time. You carry Israel on your back wherever you go. Israel is right here. Wholeness, shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. It's right here. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And then look at the people around you because it's all around you there too. Yeah, beautiful. And so, again, a borrowed phrase. If you look through a lot of ancient civilizations, you'll find they had the same perspective for their own homeland. If you're an Egyptian, it follows you wherever you go. If you're a Greek, it follows you wherever you go. It's a beautiful idea. And so go back here. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Think about what it means now. If I could retranslate this, I think in 21st century, it would look more like this. Happy are those who lost their spiritual landscape because home is now found in you. I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to have said, I left my tribe. It didn't work, or I was booted out because, I decided to come out, or I did this or this or this. Your landscape changed. Your spiritual landscape changed. And you found yourself feeling really lonely. And you found yourself feeling like you didn't have a home. But here's the beautiful message that Jesus says to the people who lost their temple and the people feeling right now spiritually homeless. The answer is you no longer need a building. You no longer need all the dogma. You don't need all of the lights and the services and all those things. You don't need it. Sometimes it's nice, but you don't have to have it because it is already here within you. It's already here. Henry Nouwen, one of my favorite writers, he's this Dutch Catholic priest, theologian. He was a professor. He has some beautiful things to say. One of my favorite, and again, I picked this picture because I just love his zest for life. He says this, leaving home is living as though I do not yet have a home and must look far and wide to find one. Now watch this. Home is the center of my being, where I can hear the voice that says, you are my beloved. On you my favor rests. I love that. Home is the center of my being. Home. Home is where I feel connected. Home is where I feel the divine, right? And it should be right here that I see it first. So happy are those who lost their spiritual landscape because home is now found in you. So whether you are someone who left your tribe and you're saying, where do I find community again? No, first and foremost, home starts here. And when it starts here, anywhere you go, you carry it with you. Beautiful, right? So how do we do that? How do we live this out? Because if we can't talk about application, then the whole thing's just, it's a sermon, right? Most of us aren't interested in sermons anymore. We want something that can be applied. And so here's some really interesting steps to learn how to see home, how to experience home right here, right now. When you have left your spiritual landscape, how do you find it here? How do you become aware of it here? Here are a couple interesting steps I've found that have worked for me. One is this: open your eyes to the good all around you. Recently, I've stopped watching the news. It's just filled with so much negativity. And again, the news for the news to be captivating to people today, it's got to be. right? Because honestly, those things are the anomaly, but it's what we oftentimes are drawn to. We don't hear about the guy that helped the old woman across the street. We don't hear about the neighbor that decided to pay the other person's mortgage. You don't hear about those things very often. You hear about war, you hear about the earthquake, and that's why they'll watch it all day, right? Because negative news sells. But what if I shut off the negative news for a bit? What if I turn the TV off and I walk outside, right? What if I begin to take notice of the nature all around me, the people around me? There are a lot of really, really good people all around you. What if I took stock of all the beauty around me? I think whenever I do this, I become more and more aware that there is beauty everywhere I go. And that beauty reflects back to who I am and who I'm becoming. It kind of moves you to become a part of the whole thing. Become more aware. Another thing I've learned is take time to get to know new people. If you have lost your spiritual landscape, if you've stepped away from your tribe, right? If you are finding yourself homeless, take time to get to know people. Step out, be uncomfortable, right? Get to know your neighbors. It's amazing how many of us don't know our neighbors. Amazing to me that so many of our coworkers, we can't even name half of them. Or we'll be able to name them, but when's the last time you actually went out and hung out with these people? You had them over for dinner. When's the last time you spent time with them? Because I think for many of us, we grew up in a tribe. Those are our people. That's who we hang out with. But what if there's a whole nother world of beautiful, new, interesting people who could actually shed even more light to who you are and who you're becoming, and they're right here all around you. You just haven't taken time to get to know them. So what if you took time to get to know new people? You joined a meetup group. You joined a book club. You started meeting people. I think for the Israelites, when they do this, in the first century, when they begin to understand that there's room for the Gentiles too, when they begin to understand that this thing is not just about being a Jew anymore, it's about being a human being, about being a loving human being. When they understood that, then everyone can be involved. Your tribe, right, grows. The spiritual landscape gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the last one, and practice daily meditations. And I don't know about you, but there's tons of different ways to do this. For many people, it's picking up your Bible, right, and reading in the morning. For many other people, it's just an inspirational book. It could be anything. It's stopping and learning to just meditate, be aware of your thoughts, or meditate on a certain mantra, whatever it is for that day. But stopping, taking the yoga class, whatever you do, practice the kingdom of heaven now mindset. Practice learning to be present before your day even starts. When you do that, when you step outside of your door, it's like that landscape just follows you wherever you go. It's beautiful. Happy are those who lost their spiritual landscapes, because so many of us have. Happy are those who lost their landscapes, because home is now found in you. Beautiful, right? Thank you so much for listening. And as always, please consider donating to ethos/church.donate. We'd love to have you there. Again, ethos/church.org/donate. Please give. Some of those donations are so helpful for us. We're a nonprofit. Again, these are tax deductible donations. They really, really do help us continue doing this ministry. And if you're interested in twice a month being a part of a online kind of group where we get together and we share ideas and stories and we deconstruct and reconstruct, please let me know. TonyWerfel@gmail.com. Email me. Let me know if you want to be a part of this thing called the Living Room Sessions. We get together, and as a group of people from Arizona to Orange County to Idaho, we're beginning to grow. And it's been so much fun. So let me know if you want to join us there. And please hit the subscribe button. Subscribe. Share these videos wherever you go. Everyone, I love you. Take care. And I'll see you next week when we continue into this series over a new way to be human, the Sermons on the Mount. Take care, everyone. Love you.